And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and it is the most important day of the week because it is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts this here Climate Realism show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute and your host. And you know what? I'm sure you know this. There is nothing else at all in the world quite like the Climate Realism show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe and leave your comments under this video because all of those very simple actions convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program and to get this show in front of more people. That is because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program. And so they have demonetized the Heartland Institute's YouTube channel. So if you want to support this program, and I sure hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS and help us keep making this show happen each and every Friday. Any support you can give us is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank, before we get started, our streaming partners, those people being junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and the great What's Up With That. So today we have with us our usual crew. We have Anthony Watts, he's senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential website on climate in the world, What's Up With That. H. Sterling Burnett, he's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lueken, a research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of exhausted from the 2 long 3+ hour watch parties we did for some of Trump's key climate appointees for his administration. But it was a lot of fun. We did 3+ hours on Wednesday for that was for Chris Martz from the Department of Energy. And then on Thursday, we did another 3+ long hours covering
Chris Martz.
Covering, did I say Chris Martz? I meant Chris Wright, of course. Yeah, Chris Martz. Maybe one day Chris Martz will be in a presidential administration. But then on Thursday, we covered live in a watch party the hearings for Doug Burgum at Interior. And we really focused on Lee Zeldin at EPA. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that on this program with some clips of things that we may have missed. So, Sterling, are you tired? I know Andy, the producer in the background, is exhausted. And how you guys?
We are in bonus time for the Climate Realism show this week. Way into bonus time. And I am. It's a little taxing to constantly be in attention, paying attention to what other people are saying, trying to figure out if it merits a response or a comment, trying to keep it lively. I'm glad that is over. But I should say it. You say every week the best day of the week. You know what makes this Friday especially special? This CR show, and I think one of our watchers mentioned it earlier. It's the last Friday we will ever have to discuss the Biden administration.
It's
the last Friday under his reign. And so it will be nice next Saturday to start off with the new administration and to see, he made a lot of comments and promises about what he's going to do on day one, what he's going to sign, what he's going to get us out of, it'll be interesting to talk next week about all that he has done.
Yep. Linnea, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's been good. I'm very much looking forward to the incoming Trump administration and the last couple of days of covering the hearings, both the ones that we specifically live streamed and also the ones that we just glanced at in the background, like Pete Hegseth's and whatnot, were very interesting and entertaining. And I have a lot of hope for this upcoming administration.
Yeah, I think we all do. And if you missed any of the watch parties, they are long videos, but they are a lot of fun. We actually had a really great time. I thought it was great. I think there's going to be some pressure on us to do more of these in the future when a certain event may warrant it. But we had guests on that just flowing in and out, guys from CFACT, Craig Rucker and Mark Morano and Debbie Johnson. We had Donna Johnson, sorry. We had Steve Malloy, of course, from Junk Science and E&E Legal. We had our friend Greg Wrightstone from CO2 Coalition. We had people from all over, and it was a great time. So when you have time over a long weekend, you might want to find those on Heartland's channel. They're very easy to find, and give them a listen while you're cleaning out the garage or getting ready for the polar vortex.
I should say, I hope if we do them in the future, that the events occur in the afternoon so the sun will be past the yard arm and we can have a drink and some hot wing. If it's a watch party, you should really have a beer and some hot wings or a burger.
Well,
but in the mornings like that, it's just not right.
That's what the State of the Union address is for. So
there you
can have a drinking game and a watch party on the stream at the same time. All right.
There you go.
Well, we got a lot to cover today, so let's just get to Anthony Watts's favorite feature of the Climate Realism Show, that being the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Yeah, we could use a little bit of that warmth very soon.
Already.
Right. But our first item here is from our friends at The Guardian, the commie newspaper from the United Kingdom. Headline is Wildfires Drive Record Leap in Global Level of Climate Heating CO2. Data for 2024 shows humanity is moving yet deeper into a dangerous world of supercharged extreme weather. The beginning of the story begins. Wildfires that blazed around the world in 2024 helped to drive a record annual leap in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, surprising scientists. The data shows humanity is moving yet deeper into a dangerous world of supercharged extreme weather. The CO2 level at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii jumped by 3.6 parts per million to 427 parts per million, far above the 280 parts per million level before the large-scale burning of fossil fuels sparked the climate crisis. The Mauna Loa observations, known as the Keeling Curve, began in 1958 and are the longest-running direct measurements of CO2. Now, Sterling, I want to start here with you on this story, because the reason I bring this up actually today is to highlight how even the alarmist's own media outlets kind of give the game away without even maybe realizing it. Because I read somewhere, couldn't find it again today, but I read somewhere that in 1 week, the LA fires wiped out any gains in CO2 reductions by humans in California over quite a few number of years. And while over time humans have increased CO2 in the atmosphere, nature's regular emissions make attempts to reduce human CO2 pretty meaningless. And that's not even mentioning, and no stories in the alarmist media ever seem to mention, the Hunga Tonga underwater volcano and its effect on global warming too. So what's your take on this, Sterling?
Well, I have two takes. First off, it's sort of appalling to me that they're writing stories about how much CO2 has been put in the air from the California wildfires while people are still watching their homes smolder and their cars, their wrecks of cars. They don't know where they're going to live. They've lost loved ones. They've lost, unimaginable amounts of personal property tied to memories that they've had. And what The Guardian wants to talk about is CO2, colorless, odorless, not dangerous. That's what should be the focus of the wildfires. It's just disgusting. The second take is that I doubt that these California wildfires are the largest reason for the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere, because they're big, but they aren't nearly as big as some of the forest fires we've had in recent years, or uh, how many coal-fueled power plants did China and India and other countries add in the past year that started operating and that are now emitting CO2? I don't think they can tease out at Mauna Loa what came from California wildfires. Remember, they're still ongoing, and I doubt the CO2 from them has reached Mauna Loa yet. The story is disgusting. The focus is disgusting. And let's be honest, it's idiotic because CO2 is not something we need to be worried about. It is life. It is life-giving, life-affirming, and not leading by any measure that we can actually measure to a climate catastrophe.
Yeah, Anthony, I say often that CO2 emissions, since a lot of coal-fired power plants were replaced by natural gas, and you could see America's CO2 emissions going down. And I would always caveat that by saying, if you care about that, and I don't, and most people shouldn't, or nobody should actually. But Anthony, what do you think here?
Well, I think this story in The Guardian, like most stories in The Guardian, is a big nothing burger. In the sense of the amount of CO2 that came out of that, yes, it's more than California has saved, but in the whole global scheme of things, it's not really going to show up. It's just a blip, a drop in the bucket kind of a thing in terms of the total content of CO2 in the atmosphere. But the problem with these folks like The Guardian is they will take any tiny nugget and spin it into some kind of a new catastrophe, as if the wildfires are going to, all of a sudden cause massive increased heating because of the little bit of extra CO2 they added in the whole global scheme of things. That's not going to happen. The other thing is that the media tends to miss context with history. For example, in 1970, there was the Laguna fire in Southern California, and this burned 175,000 acres. It killed 8 people, burned several hundred homes, and it was the worst catastrophe ever at that time. Well, since then, so many more homes have been built in the wildland urban interface that we've had much more danger to homes and to lives because so many more people are right up against the sagebrush and everything, And so what's happening today is that people are not paying any attention to the past, whether it's the planners, the governmental agencies, or the media. And they're not learning from the past. And so we end up with wildfires like we saw last week that are truly devastating, not so much because of anything that's going on different with the weather or climate, but because human population has increased and grown closer to the fuel. It's just that simple.
Yep. Very good points. Very good points, Anthony. And I saw that when Andy brought that up on screen, that fire in Laguna, it was 175,000 acres, which is more. It's greater area than right now. I think in this fire. Last I checked,
it's not just Laguna that's greater. Most of the forest fires that happened in the last few years have been much greater, much larger in size. I mean, I think California had lost. When you count all their wildfires a couple of years ago, more than 2 million acres. It's a small fraction. So to say that that this one is putting out so much CO2, it's hyper putting climate change in hyperdrive is just stupid. And but Anthony's right. One of the reasons we pay so much attention to this one is honestly, if this had happened in a wilderness area and stopped in a wilderness area, we almost wouldn't have noticed it. It's so small. Why it's important or why it's newsworthy is so many people are affected this time. And that's part of the expanding bullseye effect that Anthony was talking about, is people moving into disaster zones. If you live in where a hurricane's going to come, when a hurricane comes, a lot of people are affected.
Yeah. Linnea, anything you want to add to this before we go on to item 2?
No, I think you guys covered it pretty much about as well as it can be from me as well. So
yeah, well, I agree with you, Sterling. And one of our viewers here in the chat put up, "Never let a crisis go to waste," and it really is. They never do. They never do, and it's disgusting sometimes. And this might be one of the worst cases. All right. Let's try to cheer up and talk about the next item, which is the polar vortex coming. That'll cheer us up. So as most people know, we have there's a polar vortex coming yet again, and I wanted to highlight 2 tweets by Ryan Maui, who has not been on this show yet, and I hope he is on this show sometime very early. I hope in 2025. And he has a tweet here on X that says with a map. It says forecast lower 48 average temperature. Monday morning is 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and on January 6, 2014, the original polar vortex, it was again 8 degrees Fahrenheit is the average temperature for the United States. And then he has a second tweet where he talks about how nearly 80 million Americans will see below 0 Fahrenheit by next Tuesday, when extremely cold Canadian Siberian Arctic air descends upon the lower 48, and the nationwide average low temperature will be only 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. So, Anthony, you are the resident meteorologist on this here program, the Climate Realism Show. I wonder if you could maybe enlighten us on what's happening here with the polar vortex and how unusual it may be.
Well, it is unusual for today's present age, particularly because we've been told, we're going to see the end of snow, that sort of thing. Winter's going to disappear, all that other rubbish that the alarmists like to put out there. But the fact of the matter is, this is weather, not climate. So let's not conflate the two. We have an extreme weather event of cold coming in from the polar regions, driven by the polar vortex, which, by the way, is nothing new. It's new to the media because it's their favorite buzzword now for anything that happened in the winter, whether they try to connect it to climate change. But when I was at Purdue back in the 70s studying meteorology, we called it the circumpolar vortex. We were well aware of it back then, but we didn't assign any kind of catastrophe to it. It was just plain old weather. And the jet stream dips down, it brings a lot of cold air with it. Boom, we end up with these sub-zero temperatures across much of the Midwest and the East Coast. It's normal. It's happened thousands, if not millions of times before in Earth's history. It's nothing new. But what is new is what's happening on Monday related to this cold. I was just informed by Congressman Doug Lamoffa's office that the inauguration of Trump coming up is being moved indoors because of the cold. It's really kind of ironic that the president who denies global warming is being forced to move his inauguration indoors because of the cold.
Yeah.
You're right, Anthony. Of course, this has happened multiple times in the past. It's not just, we keep talking about sub-zero temperatures. Look, most of the country, and by most of it, I mean all of it, maybe a small portion of the West is going to be 20 to 25 degrees below their normal temperatures. Even if you're not sub-zero, if you're 25 degrees, here in Texas, we've spent a week and a half now of well below our normal temperatures, and it's going to evidently continue, persist. So it is. If you're at 10 degrees and you're normally at 40, you're already experiencing Arctic cold. And I would like to, I don't often do this, but I'm going to plug another organization's website. Go to Electroverse, because we talk about the US all the time. And we can talk about how cold it is here and how snowy it is here, but Electroverse covers the world. And if you were to go there, you would find out that the US is not unique in this regard. Most of the Northern Hemisphere right now is experiencing really, really cold, abnormally cold temperatures. Snow is falling where I won't say it never falls, but doesn't fall as often as it normally does. And I think I read that this cold period looks like it is going to make it colder than it's been as far as at global average temperatures in a couple of decades, that it's wiping out all of the global warming that we've experienced, global average. So that's something worth considering, is that, look, there are other, it's the US isn't the whole, and we're not the only ones experiencing the cold. So they can't say, oh, yeah, well, who cares about the U.S.? The rest of the world's burning up. It turns out it's not.
Well, Sterling, I think you bring up a good question, and I just sent a link to Andy. Maybe he can bring it up here. Our friend Steve Malloy, he's always pushing back at these warming narratives, and he has a tweet that says January 2025. This is even before the polar vortex sweeps in. Yep. It's 4.2 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than January 1982 in the U.S. So ask a climate hoaxer why 43 years of emissions are not warming us, or at least warming the U.S. And yes, Anthony, weather and climate are not the same thing, but how can it constantly be every single year the warmest year on record when we end up with months that are much, much colder than they have been in recent times, let alone 20 years ago?
Well, I would go back to my surface station project where I outlined how so many of the thermometers around the globe are right next to heat sources and heat sinks. And as a result, that inflates the temperature because these things absorb more energy from sunlight, and then they release it at night. They release that energy into the air at night as infrared, and the infrared warms the air near the surface at night. And so we don't see nights, particularly in the summer, get as cold as they used to. This is a documented effect. So what happens when you don't have as cold a night as you normally would, because you've got all these heat sinks and heat sources around and waste heat? It brings up the average. And the climate alarmists only look at the average global temperature. They're not interested in the minimum temperature or the maximum temperature, except when the maximum temperature hits some record highs. And then, oh no, it's driven by climate change. So these folks completely miss the most basic part of the science. And so they think that, we're seeing these temperatures, recent temperatures like in the last year, specifically driven by climate change and CO2. Not the case. This past year or so, we've seen a tremendous El Nino event came up, and it's got stacked on some previous El Nino events over the last 2 decades. And what these folks don't realize is that the time scales that the Earth operates on is much, much longer than they realize. I mean, a lot of the time scales that the Earth operates on is beyond human comprehension, beyond human lifespans. We have no memory of it. Our memories and our experiences are very, very short term, but we can't even remember the weather, what it was, a month ago or a year ago. But the Earth very, very slowly reacts to changes. And so now that the El Nino has subsided and we're seeing a reduction in the atmospheric water vapor related to the Tonga eruption or whatever it's called, we're going to see temperatures start coming down. The ocean temperatures are starting to come down. And so what that means is for 2025, not only are we going to get a cold start to it, we're probably not going to see record global temperatures anymore. They're coming down. And it'll take a couple of years before it comes back down. It's just the way things work.
Well, you say we're not going to see any record global temperatures, but I think what we will see is more media reports that we're having record global average temperatures, because it doesn't seem to matter what happens. It's always the hottest year on record, no matter what.
I can 100% guarantee this is my prediction, and I know that I'm right already. At a day in a location somewhere this year, there will be a record-breaking on thermometer record-breaking temperature. That's my big guess. On a day in a location somewhere on the planet, there will be a record-breaking temperature.
Right.
What? On a day in a location, there will be a record-breaking hot temperature, and on a day in a location, there will be a record-breaking cold temperature. Right. And you know what they will have in common, besides both being weather? They'll both be blamed on climate change by somebody. Because if it's warmer than average, it's climate change. If it's cooler than average, it's climate change. If it's, if there's a hurricane, it's climate change. If there's a wildfire, it's climate change. Weather whiplash. That's what we're facing, right? I mean, that's what we're hearing now. Weather whiplash.
Right.
Yeah, they've got this new term. We had an article on WhatsApp with that recently, where there's this new paper that got rushed out, and we're going to cover it in Climate Realism next week. But there's this new paper that came out in the last week or so, and we think it was rushed to publication because of the Los Angeles fires. But basically what they said is that we have this thing called hydroclimatic whiplash, which is a new term that just came up out of thin air this past week. The media is pushing as being the cause for the Los Angeles wildfires. These folks have no shame. They will take any nugget. There it is. Hydroclimate whiplash. Oh no! It's another earth-ending threat coming our way. And it's just absolutely bonkers how they took this paper that called hydroclimate volatility, and the media turned it into hydroclimate whiplash.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing. There's not even a definition for hydroclimate volatility in any of the sources for meteorological or climatic terms. This is just simply brand new. And so they drug it out and used it as an excuse to cover the fact that it's mostly human incompetence that has caused the Los Angeles wildfires. Bad planning, lack of fuel management, all these other problems. No. It's hydroclimatic whiplash.
Yeah. Well, if you want to do the reading that is kind of the background for this show, we have a website called climaterealism.com where Sterling and Linnea and Anthony, every week there are new posts up there pushing back at the worst of the week's climate alarmist narratives in the media. So it's a great correction. It's designed to correct the media in their alarmism with facts and data and truth. So be sure to check out climaterealism.com, bookmark it, and make it a regular destination for you. All right, let's move on to our third item, which I picked out myself as well because I think this is kind of fun and funny. And this is the idea that the United States may be getting Greenland. So this is from Politico. Why Trump's Greenland grab could be a disaster for the planet. The Frosty Island sits atop giant oil and gas reserves that climate campaigners say must never see the light of day. Keep it in the ground. I thought that meme was gone, but I guess it's coming back. All right. I'll read a bit here for you. A bid by incoming U.S. President Donald Trump to wrest control of Greenland could be big business for fossil fuel firms. It could tip the planet into a climate change spiral that it would have no hope of recovering from. Good grief. Trump, set to be inaugurated for his second term inside instead of outside because it's so chilly, on January 20th has issued a pledge to annex the icy island territory, which has been part of the Kingdom of Denmark for 3 centuries. He threatened to impose heavy tariffs to force Copenhagen's hand. There's another reason the island could be a tantalizing prospect for Washington beyond Trump's claim of needing it for economic security. According to an assessment by the U.S. Geological Survey, Greenland, quote, contains approximately 31,400 million barrels of oil and other fuel products, including around 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Quote, that's the kind of reserves that if they were discovered in Saudi Arabia or Qatar, businesses would be jumping for joy, says Ajay Parmar, senior crude markets analyst with commodities intelligence firm ICIS. Now, Linnea, as the resident former big oil employee here on this here show, first of all, I just love the idea of a newly expansionist America, and I don't know why this is considered so crazy to even entertain the idea of buying land to expand the United States like we did with Alaska. That was called in 1867, I believe was when we did it, when we bought Alaska from Russia. They called it Seward's Folly after Andrew Johnson, Secretary of State, when he bought it, but that worked out fantastic. So, Linnea, would you be jumping for joy if Donald Trump was able to pull off the land deal of the century?
It's our manifest destiny to own the entire Northern Hemisphere.
The expanded Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, I mean, if Greenland wants to join the party, sure. Although I don't know if I would love them becoming a state. Just like I don't know, unless it's like just Trump's been joking about making Canada a state as well, and unless it's just like Alberta. And, like basically Alberta can have statehood and then the rest of Canada and Greenland can be colonies that don't get representation in our government. That would probably be good.
We could take Saskatchewan too, just because I like to say Saskatchewan.
Okay, that works. I mean, In terms of resource availability, yeah, but I think the reason why a lot of people in Greenland want some independence from their current owners is because their current owners are not fans of some of the ideas of expanding their own oil and gas industry in that country. So, and they would like to be able to use the resources that are under their feet. So it's a funny idea to entertain. I don't think it's gonna happen, but but it is really entertaining to talk about, and I really strongly doubt that it would be catastrophic for the planet were we to do so.
One wonders what to say about all of his. Let's take back
Well,
the Panama Canal. Let's get Canada. Let's take over Greenland. In the end, the Greenlanders, as far as I can determine from what I've been reading since he started this whole thing, they neither want to be part of Denmark nor the United States. They want to be their own country.
yeah.
So that's a small issue. It's not as if they might want to develop their own oil resources, but they don't want to do it under the aegis of we're now part of Donald Trump's America.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
It is entertaining. But I'm with Linnea. I doubt that this is really going anywhere. I just don't believe he's going to try and annex it from a country. And I'm not unconvinced that Denmark is going to be amenable to selling it to us. You know, countries did that in the past. We did it with the Louisiana Purchase as well from the France.
Right.
And, you know, we used to do that. But when's the last time you heard of a country selling parts of its territory to another sovereign country? It's been a long time.
It's been a long time,
Right,
and
right.
maybe it's time to revisit it. You know,
And
It's
we're
like,
not Russia, thank God. So
Right.
we're not going to
We're not
annex
invading
it,
it,
by
right?
force.
We're not invading it. That's why we're part of the
Right.
United Nations. We got rid of that.
I am
ahead.
in favor of annexing Mars, though. Mars is ours.
Yes,
We're-
Mars is
we're-
ours, the moon is ours. Everything is
Ours.
Well, the problem there is getting stuff back from Mars. But, I'm hoping that Trump really pulls this off, because if he does annex Greenland, I'm betting he's going to rename it to the Republic of Marifrozo.
Well, it's not just oil and gas that they have in Greenland. It's rare earth metals, and because it's in Greenland and it won't be a state, maybe we'll just exploit them. Be
Well,
mining all over, right?
What I
Uh,
what I have heard from Republicans in government right now, in particular, is that they make the argument that we should try to purchase Greenland because global warming is going to open up the shipping lanes, and we need to control the shipping lanes, in the Arctic Circle before Russia gets a hold of them or China gets a hold of them. Which fair, but I'm thinking we've got a long time before we have to start worrying about that.
true, but there is the fight for the Arctic now. Influence in the Arctic is China and Russia and us, and we just basically have access through Alaska, and we can just go on the other side of the North American continent and get there via Greenland. I mean, in all honesty, the United States has actually had a very long presence in Greenland. We've had military bases and airports up there in the very northwest of Greenland since World War II. It was radar stations to protect us from missiles that might be coming over from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So I think that base is still operational, or it only shut down in the last 20 years. But it has oil and natural gas reserves that are just immense. It has oil, it has copper, lots of gold, lots of rare earth metals. And I will say this: it is entertaining. And one of our commenters here, there it is, Energy Colonizer. This is an Overton window shifter at a minimum, and I think that's kind of important. People are actually talking about this now. In fact, this is so serious that one of my favorite moments of all of the confirmation hearings this week in the Senate was the dumbest member of the Senate, and that is a very, very prestigious designation. Mazie Hirono of Hawaii seriously asked Pete Hegseth whether he would deny an order by Donald Trump to invade Greenland. Now, that's the kind of Overton window shifting I really enjoy.
Mazie Hirono. I'm convinced she was dropped on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese.
She might have been. All right. Well, that's a lot of fun. Well, I have.
She's certainly doing more lasting damage.
Yeah, for sure. To the United States, yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we usually put up a meme or a cartoon or something of the week.
Our friend Doug is thinking big too.
What's
What about
that?
looking southwards and pick South America entirely?
I,
Yes.
I'm not
Thank you,
for
Doug.
an expansionist U.S. I don't want empire. We weren't founded to be an empire. I don't like empires. I'd like the U.S. to, in fact, shrink and give more power to states. But
starting with the state of Greenland.
we had for many decades something called the Monroe Doctrine that we were pretty serious about,
Mhm.
and we didn't have to own or make states out of places in South America or island nations. What we did is we said, if it's in this hemisphere, we're going to be the guys that determine its future.
And
We'll send in
Greenland
the
is in the north.
military, and when you have dictators, under the Monroe Doctrine, Chavez and Maduro in my wife's home country would have been solved a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, if every country in South America had a Javier Milei, this would be a much better place. All right. Let's move on from the Burnett Doctrine to our meme of the week, which is going to be, usually we have a cartoon or a meme or something up, but I thought I'd share with our viewers and you guys here on the panel. A video came across this week. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I won't even set it up. It kind of sets up itself. Go ahead and play that, Andy.
So I understand green energy, electric vehicles, Amazon's doing their part, stay green. But doesn't it defeat the purpose when you literally have a diesel powered generator electrifying all of the electric vehicles? It makes no sense.
That is correct. It does make no sense. And why I wanted to highlight this video is that I'm sure he's, maybe he's a regular viewer of the Climate Realism show. But what I thought that video represented was that normies out there, people living their lives, are looking around and they're realizing that the climate scam is all around them in ways big and small, and also in ways that are kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Amazon's made a huge deal out of their climate pledge. And when you go and order certain products, they will say it's climate pledge friendly or whatever, right? But what you don't see is what you just saw right there. You don't see the reality in the background going on, where they're taking a diesel powered generator and using it to power a bunch of their Rivian planet saving delivery vans. It's just absurd. And it just illustrates how this whole thing is don't look at the man behind the curtain when it comes to these global warming salvation schemes,
And by the way, this whole changeover is toxic. We currently have a battery plant, I believe it's over in England burning, that they've had to evacuate people. Who knows how long it'll take them to put it out. They had one in San Diego. It took weeks. And it's not just wood smoke going up in the air there. It's toxins. And it's becoming more and more common. It's not just the cars that erupt in flames spontaneously. It's these battery plants, and it's the plants that are making the batteries, where they're stored until they're shipped. And it's the ships that are carrying the batteries and the cars. It's crazy.
Yeah, we've got the Moss Landing battery plant in fire right now, where they've had to close the highway because in both directions, because the thing is just going crazy. And so what are we really gaining?
Yeah.
Well, again, I keep bringing all this back to Greenland, but what's great about acquiring Greenland by one way or another is that if we get rid of all of this electrification of everything and the whole Green New Deal and all that garbage, if we get rid of that, there's all those fossil fuels there for us to get. If we are forced by some global cabal to go forward with this nonsense, we have all the rare earth metals, copper and all the other stuff in there too. So it's win-win. That's what I think. Nobody's with me. All right, I get it. It's fine.
We're not drilling, or we're not mining for enough copper here as it is.
Yeah. We've got these resources that they're talking about in Greenland. We have them here. I just don't believe in an expansionist United States. I want us to break up into 5 separate nations, have Ecotopia on the left, have Texiana taking up, up through Idaho and Alaska. We'll have to skip
Sterling
over
is
Canada
on the okay. So we're on the we're going to split the party here. It's either world domination or world balkanization, and there's
Yeah.
no in between.
Balkanize.
Why can't we have
All right.
both?
Yeah, well, you have to start calling it the Burnett window now because that's completely different from everybody else. All right, well, let's get on to our main topic, what we want to talk about today. Kind of a more relaxed version of what we did at the watch party on Wednesday and Thursday. I want to go over some clips here from the confirmation hearings and to talk about what climate policy might be like under Trump 2.0. The first, we'll start with Lee Zeldin, and this is a bit longer of a clip than I normally like to put on the show, but I think it's worth playing. It's about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And because it gets to a very important issue in the Environmental Protection Agency, it's kind of the, it's kind of at the crux of what sensible EPA policy, or I should say, it deals with something that has let the EPA run completely out of control and try to control every part of our lives. And that is the endangerment finding for carbon dioxide emissions. And so Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts, who is a climate moron, he is an alarmist and he has no idea what he's talking about. And you will see that in this clip, asks Lee Zeldin about the endangerment finding. And I found this response very encouraging. Give it a play, Andy.
Let me ask you the next question. Do you also accept that under the Supreme Court's ruling in 2007 in Massachusetts versus EPA and in 3 subsequent cases that the EPA is obligated to regulate greenhouse gases as air pollutants from motor vehicles, power plants, and other industrial sources as, quote, the Supreme Court said in their decision, may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare? Do you accept that as a mandate, Mr. Zeldin?
Authorized. Yes, Senator.
You do?
Authorized to, Senator.
Authorized to. You don't actually then accept the requirement that you have to deal with the endangerment that fossil fuels actually poses to LA or North Carolina or Florida or the Gulf Coast almost on a yearly basis. You don't accept that.
Senator, I just want to be accurate. And in citing Massachusetts versus EPA, the decision does not require the EPA. It authorizes the
you're
EPA.
obligated. You're obligated to regulate. If you find there's an endangerment, you're obligated. Do you feel it's an obligation?
Yeah, but it doesn't say that you are obligated to, and that's it. There are steps that the EPA would have to take in order for an obligation to be created. I'm just going off the actual text.
Right.
Of
Well,
the Supreme
again,
Court legislation.
Do you think we're in danger in LA? Do you think the people in North Carolina and the Gulf Coast were in danger?
Are they in danger? Absolutely. For people who are having their
Right.
homes burned down.
Then you have an obligation to deal with that and to do something.
Senator,
I'm not hearing your job at you see your job at the EPA as doing something about it. You know, we're watching firefighters run towards the flames in Los Angeles, and the EPA is responsible to keep the fiery embers of climate change under control. Power plants, cars, industry. Are you going to fight those dangers, Mr. Zeldin? Are you going, as you said in 2016, or are you going to fan the flames of destruction on the demand of the fossil fuel industry, which you now refuse to actually hold responsible for the rapidly warming country that we're living in?
Senator, there's a few things there. First off, as far as the Supreme Court case goes, it was not a decision of the Supreme Court that if there was a fire in 2025 in California, that if that fire creates a danger to people who are having their homes burned down, that the EPA is then that triggers the EPA to regulate carbon dioxide. There's just more to that. I'm just trying to be accurate.
Yeah.
All right.
Jim, when you called Markey a moron, that was not nearly strong enough.
Yeah, there's a lot. I could see Zeldin himself was a little taken aback. Boy, there's a lot to unpack there, Senator. There's a lot to go over.
He made a few leaps of evidence and logic in his statement, didn't he?
The embers of climate change, is that what he said? Or
Yeah, the
fiery embers of climate
fiery
change.
embers of climate change blowing.
Poetic, but moronic.
Yeah.
But I'll ask the panel though. So that to me shows that that's been kind of the crux. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me that Massachusetts versus EPA, where the Supreme Court wrongly awarded to the Environmental Protection Agency the idea to under the Clean Air Act to regulate carbon dioxide as a pollutant, which it is not, gave the EPA power that they had never had before, and they've been abusing ever since. It seems to me for at least 4 years, or for however long Lee Zeldin is going to be in charge of EPA, those days are over. That they're not going to use the endangerment finding. He said Lee Zeldin said we can regulate through it, but the assumption is he won't.
I would say two things. First off, what the EPA said, what the court said, is that anything emitted into the air is a pollutant. And if it's a pollutant, the EPA may regulate it.
Yeah. Well, by that definition, oxygen would be a pollutant.
That's correct. Water, anything emitted into the air. That was their crazy, mad ruling. And hopefully the courts will revisit that under a new court someday, because that was never intended by the Clean Air Act. But secondly, it said if the EPA finds that it endangers human health, then it may regulate it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be based on, how bad is it? What levels, all sorts of then you get into the complex calculations of what, and the EPA did not issue an endangerment finding until under Obama, and the EPA can reverse that endangerment finding. But I think at this stage, it would have to reverse that endangerment finding before it would stop the regulation of CO2, not just by EPA, but in all the different laws that
the court, you mean the Supreme Court would have to reverse it?
No. The Supreme Court could reverse itself on the pollution finding, but the endangerment finding was not a ruling by the court. It was a determination by the EPA. After the court said, it is pollution if you find it endangers, and the EPA then found it endangers. And how did they do that? Not based on evidence or data. They referenced the IPCC. They said, oh, the IPCC says it endangers us, so it endangers us. We don't need to do independent research. We don't need to check any facts. We're just going to follow whatever the IPCC says. They said it endangers us. So now that we've determined, we at the EPA have determined that CO2 endangers us, we're going to proceed to regulate.
Right. If people like Markey had their way, we would have carbon dioxide sniffer patrols, like police cars roaming the streets looking for violations of excess CO2 being emitted from somebody's barbecue or non-electric car or whatever. These people they're on a crazy mission, and it's been said before that leftism is a mental illness. It's been said, and I think it is personified in the way that these folks look at carbon dioxide, a natural part of the atmosphere that has not been shown to cause endangerment. Every one of these claims that they make about carbon dioxide causing this or carbon dioxide causing that is wild speculation. There's no science to link it. Even the IPCC says this. And yet these people persist in coming up with these insane claims that carbon dioxide is the universal boogeyman that swoops out of the atmosphere and causes specific events. It's beyond absurd.
Well, the court's ruling made the EPA virtually a dictator for the United States. It gave it control, theoretically, over the entire U.S. economy, its foreign relations, because it said any emission is a pollutant. And so it's not just that it didn't say anything about excess CO2. It didn't say anything about excess water vapor. It said if it's emitted, it's a pollutant. Now that's got to be revisited. Now since then, they have ruled there's the major questions doctrine, and certainly EPA has violated that and been slapped down at least once now in West Virginia the EPA subsequent ruling. So there's some hope that the court comes to its senses and hears a thing and says, you know what, we messed up. It's not the case that anything that's emitted is a pollutant.
Yeah.
But before then, the EPA can go back and revisit the endangerment finding, and hopefully it'll do that under Zeldin to say, yeah, if we found it was a danger, we were allowed to regulate it, but we don't find it's a danger.
That seemed to be what he was saying in that hearing for sure. Okay, let's move on. I got a couple more clips we want to play here and get some reaction to and show them for our audience before we get to Q&A. The second one, this is from Doug Burgum. He is at Interior. Energy exploration is very much a key responsibility on public lands in the Department of Interior. And so Senator Angus King, who claims to have some professional and private sector experience in energy, I did not research that, but he says so in his Senate hearing, tried to get Doug Burgum, he tried to nail him down on kind of his views of quote unquote renewable energy, since there are quite a few windmills erected in his home state of North Dakota. I don't think it went as well as Senator King expected it to. Go ahead, play that for us, Andy.
Would you agree that renewable resources, solar and wind, for example, can be developed if they are adequately, if they can be integrated into the grid in a safe and reliable way?
Yes, they can, and it's not for me personally for any political reasons that I distinguish. It's just because of physics, the physics of the grid. If we don't have enough base load, and it's the base load that we have that's allowed our nation to make the investments into the intermittent.
I don't want the word. In a former life, I developed both base load and intermittent resources. I don't want the word base load to be code for no renewables. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, we need a balance, but they cannot. The intermittent, if you want to call them renewables, is used as a positive word, but this is a fact of life, is they're intermittent. And when they're intermittent, until we have storage solutions, and we're years away from having significant enough cost-effective storage to support that, we need to have the base load, or the intermittent doesn't even have a life. But
so, Linnea, that's interesting. Is it not? I mean,
it's a terrific answer from Burgum. I mean, even though he goes along with the wind and solar stuff generally. And we all know that he is a major proponent of and supporter of carbon capture technology and infrastructure. He's right. I mean, we keep doing all of this wind and solar infrastructure planning based on battery storage technology that doesn't exist yet. And no matter what it is, whether it's massive grid scale battery storage or fusion, you really should not be planning infrastructure based on technology that does not exist. So he's totally right. You need, no matter what it is, even if it's, we're going to say we're going to make 80% of the US grid based on nuclear fusion. You can't plan your infrastructure based on that. You need to plan for what we have now, which is we have reliable fuels like natural gas and coal, and hydropower resources and other types of nuclear that are not science fiction at the moment. And that's what we should be focusing on. And when technologies do develop that are suitable to add to the grid, that's when you can start planning to add them. But to do all of this, like throwing money at these technologies as if they exist now when they don't is just insanity.
I reject the thought that politicians should be planning these things.
Well, yeah, but
look, market should dictate, and market, the public. You ask the public, they want two things top dead center with electricity in order: reliability. They have to have the lights come on when they flick them on. They have to have their air working in the summer. They have to have their heat working in the winter. They care about reliability more than anything. Second thing they care about is costs. And politicians shouldn't be ladling more costs and making the grid less reliable because, and I looked into it. Oh, yes. Angus King, he's got a lot of experience in energy. What was his experience in energy? He founded a company for energy conservation, which means restricting people or imposing mandates on you must use the best energy, the most efficient energy resource. Let's say a new dishwasher that takes 3 hours rather than 1 hour because it uses less energy. So it's less effective. It may be more energy efficient, but it's a less effective and it takes more time. So that's his experience in energy, is trying to force conservation on people. So is it really surprising? The people of Maine, the governor wanted to push offshore wind, and she did some experimental stuff, and she got slammed. And she said, I'm not going for any more of this. They started building them on mountaintops, and people complained. We're tired of having our view sheds destroyed. But Angus, he knows energy. Jeez.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave that there. I think that's actually that. Well, as we were watching on the watch party, Steve Malloy and Mark Morano, who are been living in DC for a very long time and have a lot of DC cynicism, they're about up to their chins in it. They were pretty pessimistic about Doug Burgum's answers. They didn't really like Chris Wright's answers too much in energy. They weren't super happy with Lee Zeldin either. We tried to cheer them up, and we will keep our eye on them. I think it's obviously a lot better. Who they're replacing is a lot better, for sure. So one more clip I wanted to play, and this actually relates to Lee, not to Lee Zeldin, to Chris Wright, who is up for energy. I'm sure all these guys are going to get approved. It looks like it doesn't look like there's anybody that's going to be rejected, at least in the first round. But we have a clip. This is from the Treasury Secretary, and I actually shared this with our climate friends, saying when your Treasury Secretary is better on energy than your Energy Secretary. And so this is Besant. Is that his name? Is that how you say his name? He's going to be our Treasury Secretary. I just thought this was really great. This kind of shows how good the picks by Trump so far already are.
Now there is a big effort in the Trump administration to reverse it. I think that's going to be bad for the economy, but it is going to be damn good for China because we are in an arms race on clean energy with them. Are you going to be on the side of people who want to unravel this?
Senator Wyden, just so we can frame this for everyone in the room, China will build 100 new coal plants this year. There is not a clean energy race. There is an energy race. China will build 10 nuclear plants this year. That is not solar. I am in favor of more nuclear plants. And I would note that the IRA, as scored by the CBO, is wildly out of control in terms of spending on the upside.
Now, Anthony, you were not able to be with us on the watch party. You were busy with other things, and you haven't really watched a lot of these things. After seeing those three clips, how are you feeling about what Trump's climate policies are going to be through his cabinet from 2025 and beyond?
Well, two phrases come to mind: slash and burn and scorched earth. I think we're going to see a rollback of lots of ridiculous regulations. Trump has made it clear he wants to open up the energy market. He wants to make America prosperous again. He wants to make America an energy leader again. And, when you look at what else the rest of the world is doing, like China and India, we're not getting any advantage ourselves for, restricting ourselves. China and India are going gangbusters on coal plants and everything else, including nuclear. Why shouldn't we? Nuclear is the best path forward, in my opinion. Nuclear provides clean energy. And, yes, there's going to be those people that say, nuclear is dangerous. It's going to kill us all. Well, just about everything you do in life comes with some kind of a risk. Nuclear is very low risk when you look at the statistics associated with it. Yes, we've had a couple of accidents, but one of them, like the one in Russia, with Chernobyl, that was because they had a flawed design from the start. Nobody's going to do that anymore. You're never going to see a nuclear reactor built like Chernobyl anymore. Same thing with 3 Mile Island. Nobody died in 3 Mile Island. Yes, we had some venting of some emissions and so forth, but nothing was catastrophic about it. They're cleaning it up and the plant is still operating. And so what we've got coming now are these small modular nuclear reactors. And these things are dynamite. They're fantastic. They're safe. They're compact. They can be deployed just about anywhere. You know, they can power a town, small city, whatever. These small modular nuclear reactors are the way of the future, and we should be embracing that. And I think the Trump administration is going to light a fire under those things. Not literally.
Oh,
that's
and
great.
look, big tech is already embracing nuclear and micro nukes, right? You know, I think Microsoft wants to reopen 3 Mile Island and get all the power from it. Other places are trying to build nuclear just dedicated to them. We've talked about that, whether that's a good idea or not in the past, but I think nuclear is coming, but nuclear still takes time. Even the small modular reactors, they are not, they're going to cost more than projected because the government will put regulations and lawsuits will be filed. And B, they will take time, and it's going to just take, there'll be lawsuits filed. It will, as good as the technology may be, as good as existing nuclear technology actually is. You know, we did open 2 new nuclear plants, major nuclear plants, large nuclear plants, in the past decade or the past 5 years. They're operating, they're producing good power. They're not killing anybody. But we're not building those.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I am just grateful that we have incoming cabinet secretaries who are in the reality-based community and do not try to impose fantastical BS green ideology onto the reality-based world, which is what we live in. And so I'm super excited about that for as long as it lasts. All right. It's time for
Some of
Q&A.
us are more real than you.
Yeah, that's true. We're already a little bit over an hour. We want to get to some of the great questions in the chat. So Linnea, please take it away.
Yep, sure thing. Very first question, very important question from It Is I Too, who says, where is the weekly gym rant? We did not get a rant this week. Very sad. You're right.
Well, we preempted the In the Tank show on Thursday, where I usually do most of my best rants because we were doing the watch party. So come back next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern.
He's trying to play the voice of moderation. He did that during the hearings as well.
I'm worn out, man.
He was the Panglossian guy in the hearings. Oh, it's, you know, they're not as bad as you think they are. Their response wasn't as terrible as you think it is. It's like, no, Jim, it was.
Well, I think maybe your interest in a gym rant can be sated today with his bloodthirst for global domination. So
exactly.
Right, his invasion, all that energy there. Yeah.
His invasion of Greenland and
that's right. Okay, so here's our question from Simon Waring. I hope I pronounced that right, Simon, who asks, does anyone think that under Trump, the EPA will be forced to repeal the CO2 endangerment finding? I think it would destroy the last hopes to save a dying narrative and a failed theory. What do you guys think? Feasible that endangerment will be taken out? I know it's on our, wish list.
I think that they'll certainly try. But I think the left will go berserk and they will throw every legal piece of tool they have at it. No matter how absurd it might be, they will do everything in their power to stop that from being repealed, because that is the crux of their whole let's regulate the hell out of America argument.
Trump is not a stupid man. He learns. And he learned a lot in that first term about how deep the swamp is. And he learned a lot about what it takes to change regulations fundamentally, by which I mean the actual technical details of following the law and how to go about doing it. Because many of the changes he made, good changes though they were halted by the courts or stopped by the courts because they didn't go through the proper processes mandated. The endangerment finding, if they go through the proper processes, and I think they could, I don't think he'll mandate it. But based on Zeldin's responses, I think they'll reconsider it like no one's reconsidered it before. They didn't reconsider it under Trump. I mean, under the first Trump, right? His EPA director was not pushing that. Zeldin might, but it would take time. It would take following the proper processes, and even once it's done, lawsuits will be filed.
Yep.
Lawsuits will be filed against the filings to the public hearings, against the preliminary findings. They will constantly challenge it. Now, can they last through 4 years? Who knows? Court cases sometimes take decades. The question is, if they do, if Zeldin acts, rescinds the endangerment finding, and it's tied up in lawsuits, what will the courts rule? I don't know. That might get us back to where I think we need to be, where the Supreme Court says we made a mistake. Not everything that's emitted is a pollution. But also it would be, who's going to be the president after him? Because to make it stick, you have to have somebody who believes the same thing that he believes about this, or 4 years from now, or shortly thereafter, we'll be back where we are now.
Right. Thank you, Sterling. All right. So we've got 2 questions that are the same question, but they are from Above Us Only Sky, and also from Michael Johansson, who asked, will Trump just pull out of the Paris Agreement or put a final nail in it and submit it to the Senate? Do you guys, Anthony, you think that'll happen this time?
I think he will, because I would say he has to be irritated at the fact that one of the first things Biden did was rescind his rescinding of the Paris Agreement, And so I think he's going to make that a in-your-face kind of a thing once he gets back in office next week. I think he will do it. And I think the point about sending it to the Senate, he will do it to ensure that it can't be rescinded. Because really, that's what needs to happen. The Paris Agreement is just a fantasy. The numbers that they have in that, are already been exceeded. The 1.5 degree danger zone, we've already exceeded that. And, the world did not collapse, although they claim that, fires and tornadoes and everything else are caused by CO2. It hasn't really happened. And so I think there's a good chance that Trump is going to say, yeah, I'm going to go neener on you and take this back and then send it to the Senate to basically put a nail in it.
Yeah, see, everyone talks about the U.S. being rogue. The U.S. being rogue. We go our own way. On the Paris Climate Agreement, Obama was rogue. How so? We're the only country that's a signatory to the agreement that didn't treat it like a treaty. He said, no, it's an executive agreement. We don't need Senate ratification. We can just do this through executive action. It's not really a treaty. It is a treaty. Every other country that signed it treats it as a treaty. And so we should as well. And why that kills it? Because there's not 2/3 support for the Paris Climate Agreement in the Senate. And while it's being considered, whether they bring it up for a vote and it loses, or they just don't bring it up for a vote, while it's sitting there before them, no other president can put us back in it.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. This is a question from Charlie Hicks, who says, do you think Trump will reinstate the R410A refrigerant systems? And I'm not familiar with this, but Sterling, I'm going to guess that you are.
My suspicion. Go ahead.
R410 is one of a whole series of refrigerants that have evolved ever since the original, ban on CFCs. And each one of these things, they keep replacing the refrigerants every few years. And I see this more as a business opportunity than an actual saving of the planet, because they use the saving of the planet argument in the ozone as a crux to build up, another new refrigerant that's even safer, and we need it now.
And more expensive.
Right. And so I don't think there's going to be any focus on this. It's a minor player in the whole scheme of things. And the ozone crisis that was supposedly going to happen has not. And now there's much more evidence This suggests that the ozone hole has always been there and that the refrigerants really don't have much effect on it whatsoever. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to go put it back. I think they'll just leave the status quo, but they probably won't try to push any more new refrigerant on us, during Trump's term.
I think Anthony's right. I don't think they'll revisit the issue for two reasons. First, since the ozone treaty was passed, they recently, during Biden's years, they passed a new addendum to it that was ratified that basically precludes going back to old refrigerants, that we've got these new ones. Now, that was purely let's create jobs in America decision, right? Because the replacement refrigerants were being made abroad, and the more expensive refrigerants that they wanted to replace it with were made domestically. And so you got a lot of Republicans. You got Republicans that signed on to making these things more expensive. They did. And so I don't think that could pass because it's part of the treaty now. Secondly, I think once again, Anthony's right, that what you might see, and not just for refrigerants, but for a whole class of Department of Energy regulations on efficiency standards, he might roll back some of the efficiency standards. Wright might roll back some of the efficiency standards. And they might go to Congress and say, let's put an end to this. Let's remove from the Department of Energy its ability to mandate for the public that they should care about efficiency.
That would be great, because I'm really looking forward to a 15-minute dishwasher to go with a 15-minute city.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we're pretty well over time here, but we're gonna run through a couple more questions, but we're gonna try and do these lightning round styles so that we can do them really fast. Before we get to real questions, I want to pop one up really quick that just made me laugh, so I'm gonna put it there. This is from David Voigt, I think this is pronounced, who says, "Wouldn't getting Greenland make sense? It could be a new Green Deal." I like that. Thank you very much, David. All right. Here's a quick question. I actually think that the answer is no right off the bat, but Slartibart Fast asks, can Trump make it illegal to use lawfare for lawfare's sake? No, I don't think he can. Panel?
That's a real sticky wicket.
It's not an executive. It's not something that can be solved with executive order. He could encourage Congress. They could pass a law saying, limiting the number of lawsuits that can be filed, when they can be filed, that they have to be before the final determination is made, that they can't come back and bring up new concerns after the determination is made. You get a window to do it, but Trump can't do that on his own.
All right, this is a question from Energy Colonizer with regards to the LA wildfires, who says, is this the largest urban fire in California's history? Anthony, do you know that answer?
I'm researching that answer as we speak.
Okay, we'll hold off on it. Did you get it?
It's not the largest urban fire in history. It might be for California, but we have two examples that I can cite. There's the largest fire ever in urban history, was the fire in Tokyo in 1945, which killed more than 100,000 people, partly because of the way the houses were made. And then we had the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, Great Jacksonville Fire of 1901, and so forth and so on.
Well, the Great London Fire, Rome burned while Nero fiddled, right?
Right. Yeah. There's been lots of urban fires, and the only difference between those and this one is we have 24/7 media coverage on CNN.
Well, in fact, Anthony, wasn't
Hollywood celebrities that are affected.
Wasn't there a Los Angeles area fire in like the 1960s that burned down a bunch of neighborhoods? I don't recall.
In fact, there was, and I remember seeing this week, and I wish I had it to show you. There's a picture of Richard Nixon, who was living in Brentwood at the time, renting a house. He's standing on the roof with a garden hose, wetting it down to keep the embers from, catching his house on fire. And so, yeah, there have been other instances of large fires in the Los Angeles area.
The Great San Francisco Fire. Yeah, someone just brought that up.
Right.
Next question. Diane Selby asks, can scientists quantify how much water vapor factors into global climate? Seems to me there's a huge variable that's left out of the models. And I think they do talk about water vapor in the models. I don't think they're totally left out. But I think they're not being maybe used as well as they could be, right, Anthony?
Yeah, there's that picture of Nixon, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's become an urban firefighter before he was vice president or president. Anyway,
of course, he's in a suit with only his jacket missing. That's just so Nixon and so 60s. Just love it.
Short tie. Yeah.
All right, next question.
As far as water vapor goes, yes, it's figured into the climate models, but what they don't figure in is things like the Hunga Tonga eruption, where it's injected a bunch of water vapor. Climate scientists across the board, most of them anyway, have said, oh, well, that has nothing to do with anything with the warming over the last couple of years. But when you look at the data, it suggests that it has. So I think that what they're really missing is the transient increases in water vapor in the models.
Well, they don't. The models don't. They portray water vapor as a relatively steady state.
Yes,
except for in warming scenarios, right? I mean, they are saying that it'll increase evaporation, which is increasing water vapor, which will increase
rain,
warming and rain and all that.
Yeah, but that's not affecting the temperature. The point is, climate models look at temperature and they say, oh yeah, okay, water vapor goes up, but it then comes down as rain. It has no impact on global average temperature. And that, of course, is false, because what they don't and what they can't, and what everybody admits they can't, is they can't account for clouds, and clouds are water vapor.
All right. Let me pull one more question. Here's a good one that touches on oil and gas stuff. Rico Man asks, will Trump slap tariffs on Canadian oil and gas, which will drive up the cost to Americans, at least in the short run? Rico, I hope not. But Trump does like tariffs with regards to reciprocity with our other countries that we do business with. Although I think that Canada, especially if Trudeau is kicked out, might actually treat us well on these kinds of deals. So Trump will treat them well. It's going to depend on what Canada wants to do. What do you guys think?
I think Trump will waive all tariffs if they give us Alberta.
Well,
and if they help us invade Greenland. I was going to bring it back. You knew I was going to bring it back to Greenland.
There you go. It all comes back to Greenland.
It all comes back to Greenland.
We'll always have Greenland.
But yeah, no, I think that it's gonna depend on what Canada does. If Canada all of a sudden decides that they're going to be hard on us, although I would argue that we've been harder on them when it comes to oil and gas stuff anyway. Keystone was wanted very much by the Canadians, even the Liberal government. It was the United States that ruined that one for everybody. So sorry. But yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about Trump being too hard on Canada.
Yeah, it's all posing and bluster, and it's a lot of fun and very entertaining. So
I think we do have tariffs on their. I think we do have tariffs on their wood products, their forestry products, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
All right. I would equate it to something called cash register rattling instead of saber rattling.
Yeah, that's pretty clever. Very clever. Okay. Well, on that note, that music that you hear means that we are at the end of this episode, number 141 of the Climate Realism Show. I want to thank everyone who is participating in a very vibrant chat today on Rumble and on YouTube. And also watching on X, we had almost 2,000 people today watching the show live. That was fantastic. So to help us grow this audience even more, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Leave comments under there. Tell people about it. Tell your friends who are interested in this topic or who you think need to learn more about this topic to become regular viewers of the Climate Realism Show. We would be very appreciative of that. I want to thank Linnea Lueken and Sterling Burnett and Anthony Watts of the Heartland Institute for being on the show today and being a part of the Heartland Institute. I also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. Always visit climaterealism.com. Always visit climateataglance.com. Go to whatsupwiththat.com. And for everything you need to know about the climate and lots of other topics, please visit heartland.org, where you can also subscribe to the Climate Change Weekly newsletter, written every week by one Sterling Burnett right here on this program. Thanks again for watching this week. We'll see you next Friday. Bye-bye.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.